Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Bobby Ghosh. I am the editor-in-chief of Quartz Events, and I'd like to thank all of you, those of you who are here in the room and the audience on live stream around Africa, indeed around the world. Thank you for spending your evening, your time with us. In exchange, I can promise you that you will have a rich intellectual feast this evening, full of the high protein of ideas and inquiry. But before we get to that, a few small points of housekeeping. The first, and this is the most important perhaps because of security reasons, please everyone, make sure you have this on at all times. The security folks have said that if you don't have one of these on, they may not allow you to re-enter should you find reason to step out of this room. So please make sure you have this on at all times. Second, about Wi-Fi. If you haven't already connected, you can use the hotel Wi-Fi network. It's called Sankara. You will be prompted for a voucher. Use the voucher Quartz, Q-U-R-T-Z, all in lowercase, and you should get online pretty easily. Once you do, I encourage you to use our hashtag for the event today, which is hashtag QZ Africa Summit. Tell the world, share your thoughts about the proceedings this evening. We want to hear from you, and I'm sure people around the world will be following as well. Now, a little bit about Quartz, QZ or QZ.com, depending on how you choose to pronounce that last letter of the alphabet. We are a global digital news organization. We are headquartered in New York. We are 10 days from our 3rd birthday, so we are quite new. And we are dedicated to the idea of examining the world through the lens of the new global digitally enabled economy. And by definition, that means we do a lot of stories about economics, about finance, business, markets, companies, and technology, but it doesn't stop there. We believe that everything in the world around us can and should be seen through that lens. So the new global digital economy affects politics, it affects culture, it affects attitudes, it affects activism, it affects sport, it affects every aspect of our lives, and in turn, what we do and say in our digital lives affects that economy. And we've been dedicated to that idea right from the beginning. We have been a global organization since the day of our birth. We have correspondents all over the world, and we now have 2 editions, one in New Delhi, in India. We have correspondents all over that country, and now, starting from the 1st of June this year, Quartz Africa. The editors of Quartz, we like to think that the perfect Quartz story lies at the intersection of 2 I's, the interesting and the important. But when it comes to Quartz Africa, I'm tempted to add a 3rd I, and that is the innovative. I don't need to tell an audience sitting here in Nairobi, the beating heart of African innovation, that innovation informs so much of the story of Africa today, or at least it should. If you draw a Venn diagram of the 3 circles of the interesting, the important, and the innovative, where those 3 circles intersect, that is where Quartz wants to live. That's where Quartz Africa intends to live. And as you know, there are tremendous stories to be told about innovation in Africa. I have been a journalist for 30 years, much of that as a foreign correspondent around the world. And so much of the story of Africa, when I started my career, was about international solutions for African problems. More recently, that story, thankfully, has matured into an understanding of African solutions for African problems. But now, very exciting for us, we're getting into the realm of discussing African ideas for global problems. And that is what drives us, that is what makes us excited about working in Africa. In a while, you'll hear a little more from the editor of Quartz Africa. We're gathered today to celebrate that innovation, the innovative spirit of Africa, and its innovation from all walks of life. I hope you've had a chance to look at our website today, qz.com, as I said. We are honoring 30 young innovators. It was difficult to boil down the choice to 30. Hopefully this will be the first of many every year. But we came down to 30 young innovators who are doing amazing things in different walks of life. And I'm delighted to say 10 of them are here today to join us, some of whom have agreed to tell us their stories, talk about their ideas on the stage, and you will get to hear them here. And then afterwards, I hope you will all join us for cocktails and dinner downstairs, and you'll have an opportunity to talk to them yourselves directly. Before we get to the formal part of the evening, I want to take a moment to thank the underwriters for this evening's event. General Electric has been an amazing partner for Quartz right from the beginning of Quartz, the mothership, if you like. They were our launch sponsors in Quartz India. They've been our launch sponsors in Quartz Africa. And I like to think this is because we share a vision, that we see the world in the same way. And to tell you more about this is the President and CEO of General Electric Africa, Jay Ireland.
My mic, not the, there you go. Okay. Thanks. Again, we're very happy to be partnering with Quartz. We believe at GE that innovation is the key to solving Africa's problems, and we're doing a lot about it. I'll tell you about that in a few. There's really no need for Africa to be the next cheap labor source for the world's manufacturers. We think there's a much broader capability here. And I can tell you, I moved here 4.5 years ago here to Nairobi. So for you people that are not from here, welcome. And we put our headquarters here. And what you heard about the innovation here has been totally mind-boggling to me since we've been here. And that many people don't really understand what's going on and what the potential is. So I thought President Obama's visit in the end of July, focused around the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, was able to really highlight a lot of that. So we're very happy with that. The other thing from us as innovation is we're in the transition of becoming really a digital industrial company. We've spun off a lot of our financial assets, and we're now focused on our infrastructure aspect. But at the same point in time, we're probably in the forefront of utilizing what we initially termed the industrial internet, which now is being used a lot, a few years ago, and really driving change. The other thing that we've done on innovation is trying to find out globally what's going on and what are the hindrances and opportunities in innovation. So we have done a global innovation barometer for the last 4 years around 26 countries around the world. Here in Africa, we've done that in Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And some of the key factors of success, these were big surveys with a number of CEOs, academics, et cetera, around these 3 countries in Africa. The key factors were collaboration. No surprise there. We've seen that not just in the United States and Silicon Valley, but also now we're starting to see a lot more in other areas of the US as well as other areas of the world here, which has been nicknamed the Silicon Savannah. Skills development, absolutely critical, not just for innovation, even just for normal business aspects as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Development of SMEs and the ability to develop SMEs. How do you get businesses started? How do they get financed, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, regulatory support. And this is very important as well. You need a government that really is geared towards fostering innovation across their communities. So some of the things we found in the survey was those were what's needed. And Africa lacked in a few of those. I think the collaboration people felt pretty good about. You see the strong capability here with mobile networks and the ICT infrastructure. But skills development is a key thing. We need universities focused on technical skills. We need much, much more than we have now. Quantity is absolutely key as well as quality. And we need that from a standpoint of the ability to also teach and understand entrepreneurship. It is a little bit different. People have got to understand what it's like to run a business, to start a business. Those things are all lacking in most African universities right now, and we feel that those are some that should be addressed. I think another key thing from a standpoint of financing, which is obviously a key, and when you see, some could say, pretty unbelievable valuations of some of these ideas in the US, The ability to have that same impact here is tough. Capital markets are very thin, the liquidity is very small, and venture capital as we know it in the United States and elsewhere around the world really doesn't exist here. And that's really some of the fuel, if you will, that really drives innovation as well. So we need to see a lot more around that, and a little bit of that is regulatory. And then finally, we need the focus of the governments on helping all of you establish and bring your ideas into an establishment of a business. And when you look at a lot of the ability to start businesses, ease of doing business, many African countries don't top that list. And so I know many of the heads of state that we deal with and talk to this about have that on their list, but as we all know, and many of as we're in power generation, oil and gas equipment, healthcare, locomotives, transportation, aviation, we deal with a lot of governments. And I can tell you it's still a bureaucratic area, and we're a big company, so we can navigate a little easier. So people starting out, it's very difficult. And I think there's a lot of focus on that, which is great. We really want to be perceived as an innovation partner, and we think that we can do that. And we've done that through a number of things. From skills development, where we've started the GE Africa Learning Advisory Board, a number of universities across the region really working with us in helping develop curriculum, et cetera. We've sponsored 4 universities for technical curriculum in a number of countries. And then we've got a number of facilities. Do I click this the right way? There we go. In Nigeria, we're going to invest about $1 billion on the ground in CapEx over the next few years, along with the last few years as well. This is a concept that we started called GE Garages. This was started in the United States, and it was really to kind of re-energize the manufacturing base in the United States. And what it was kind of pop-up shops, if you will. In Austin, we did it, in Chicago, New York, and we kind of moved them around and kind of set up for 3 weeks or so at a time, an area maybe the size of this room, with some 3D printers, CNC machines, a number of other devices to kind of show people where the state and the art of manufacturing is. It's no longer lathes and metal bending and all of that. And so we did that. So one of the thoughts that we had was to bring that to Africa. So last year we went to Lagos, and we started the GE Garages in Lagos. We partnered with the Dangote Foundation, and we had a location in our contiguous to our office site in Lagos, and we ran that for about a month. We had a lot of tremendous ideas. A few people came in, they kind of figured out they could start their own business, which was great to see. It's open to anybody. It's mainly, and we staff it with the machines I talked about, but also collaboration with people that can help you all if you wanted to go and work the machines, understand what the potential is, and really see and maybe bring some ideas to fruition. And then we're now looking for a permanent site there as well. And last month when the president was here, we announced that we were partnering here with Gearbox here in Kenya, in Nairobi, to establish a permanent site, the first permanent site of GE Garages in Africa. And again, we feel it's a great collaborative effort with the Gearbox team. We feel that it's an absolutely critical piece from a standpoint of their tie-in and what they're doing. I'm sure you'll hear some of that here tonight. And we think that this is going to be an excellent venue for many people to really come in and really see what the potential is, and use a very overused term, but to hopefully leapfrog Africa, so we don't have to go through 20 years of building up a base of industry that is the same as everywhere else in the world. And then finally, or not finally, but in healthcare, to the point about making products for the world, we've done a couple of things. We've developed in India and China and Africa the ability to really bring products that we feel are designed for the markets. Too many times in technology, people come to a developing world and try to dumb down, if you will, in their minds, the solutions. And quite frankly, you can't use a developed market solution for the developing world. And that's one thing that we've really focused on. So a few of our products in healthcare, one is the V-Scan, a handheld ultrasound about the size of my hand with a small probe. And the goal about this is to be able to bring access, which is absolutely critical. We can take this out to midwives in Tanzania, in Ghana, and they can do probes on pregnant women out in the villages and determine early on whether or not they need to go to a hospital, a birthing center, or are able to do it in their village or their home. And that has saved many lives, but this actually is a great way to bring access of healthcare. The second one is a Care Station 30. This is an anesthesia machine, monitoring machine, and this was developed with 10 or 12 doctors here in Kenya from the standpoint of what's needed. And to put it into perspective, most of the machines that come here to Africa come here with one key thing to make them work. And what's that? A plug. And we all know in many places, plugs don't always provide the power that we need. And so this one has a separate power source, can be charged with battery powered, et cetera. All things that we sort of know here, living here, but people take for granted when they develop them from somewhere else. This is great. We've got it here in Kajabi Hospital and is being rolled out as well as we go forward. And then finally is the Lullaby Baby Warmer. Again, much lower cost, a real focus. And again, same deal. You know, the key thing on that was a plug. And that one we've changed and has really brought a lot of capability here for the first few hours after delivery of many of the babies. And partners in innovation is a key thing. I think, you know, one of the issues I talked about was SME development and SME financing. We've got a supplier development vehicle that we've worked with financiers here in the region to really provide the capability and the catalyst financing to really start a lot of these small companies into being our suppliers. To put it into perspective, a job in the developed world, mostly the US, a GE job, every GE job roughly has 8 jobs in the supply chain. Here we don't even have 1 yet. So we need to, and so that's the multiplier effect that you can do from that standpoint. We also are putting a $50 million customer innovation center in Africa, in South Africa, that'll be focused in on driving innovation with our customer base, not just in that country, but broadly, working with some engineering capability there as well. And then the final thing is skills development. Doing the stuff that I talked about with the curriculum development, scholarships, internships, anything we can do to continue to build the capability of the people here in the region to really utilize their innovative background to really drive growth. So again, I think this is a great, I applaud Quartz for recognizing Africa as a place to really be. We are super excited about what is available here from a standpoint of talent, opportunity, and plenty of things that we can do. So again, I thank you. There's no place better than innovating in Africa. So thanks very much.
Please welcome Yinka Adegoke, editor of Quartz Africa.
Hi everyone. Thank you for being here for the Quartz Africa Summit. Creating the list of the 30 African innovators was one of the most humbling exercises myself and my team have undertaken. It was humbling because as you did the research and you started to understand the stories, you started to respect and really understand the creativity, the determination, the ambition that makes these people worthy of describing them as African innovators. With innovation, we've always thought this was, as Bobby had said earlier, we'd always thought this was the lens through which we would tell the stories of Africa when we launched Quartz Africa. And what we're finding now is that many of the people on this list have done things and have moved boundaries forward that make these stories easier to tell. And we're going to see many more of these stories as we go on. Tonight you're going to listen to, we have 6 of the innovators in the room, of the 30 that we have. And they're going to talk about a variety of things that are not necessarily about technology and infrastructure. And that's because that's the way we see innovation. We see it, not just about technology, but about moving boundaries with culture and design and leadership in politics, for example. And it's why you hear a variety of stories, such as an architect in Lagos who has dedicated a lot of his energies towards fixing a problem of flooding and overcrowding in the slums of Lagos, the waterside slums of Lagos. You will hear the story of a Wall Street commodities trader who gave that all up and became an entrepreneur developing proprietary data technology platforms to help the African agriculture sector. And pretty soon it will go beyond Africa. You'll also listen to a Kenyan photographer, talk about how he uses digital platforms to organize political activism. Then there's the astrophysicist turned tech entrepreneur who created a simple SMS code system which is used on pharmaceuticals to help people authenticate their drugs, a proper problem, a real problem right here on the continent in many other countries. We'll also hear a young South African rocket scientist talk about how his plans to help South Africa solve its energy problems. And our keynote interview will be with Oriokolo, who many of you know here. She's well known to many of us. We will listen to her story about pioneering social media activism here in Africa, and frankly, globally. She's someone that many people around the world look to for the work that she's done and the initiatives that she started. She'll also talk about being an investor on the continent, and an impact investor, and talk us through how that works here. Overall, we hope you find the conversations as fun and interesting as we believe they will be. We hope they spark ideas and other conversations once you leave here. And we're grateful for your time, for being here. And thank you.
Please welcome Kunle Adeyemi, founder of NLE.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for being here to listen. When I was asked to speak about African solutions for the world, I was incredibly skeptic about that, and it was a daunting task for a number of reasons. One, first of all, I had to question what, it raised the question of what African really means, the sort of age-old social political inquiry about what it is to be African. And then, of course, the fact that we're now talking about African solutions for the world. It's quite an ambitious and perhaps a very forward-thinking approach. But nonetheless, I thought I should look through some of the things that I am personally doing myself, and I guess I was invited for that purpose. So I thought I should examine this question through the lens of two important challenges and I would say opportunities that we face today. The first being urbanization. I think this is one of the most important challenges of our time. Urbanization is the impact of urbanization all over the world is a result of the results that we're seeing are manifold. And the other challenge, very quickly, is climate change. And that has a huge environmental impact, as we will be seeing as follows. Very quickly, my practice is called NLE. We're focused on architecture, urbanism, and design, on developing cities and communities. And we essentially believe that solutions within the developing world indeed can be applicable for the developing regions and even the developed world. My focus today would be on the project that I've worked on, which really is an example of innovation as we see it. It's called Makoko Floating School, but it's actually an interesting story which began from a point of research. We know as a matter of fact that by 2050, nearly 70% of the world population will live in cities, and that agglomeration is happening a lot within the continent. And one of the interesting findings that we have come across is that nearly 70% of the world capital cities are by water. So you have all the major cities all over the world by water. A less perhaps obvious finding is that, again, nearly 70% of all the African capitals are also by water. So if you include the commercial capitals all around the continent. Well, this is not a particularly surprising fact because, of course, cities have always settled by water because water really is sort of the cradle of civilization. And in the first settlements, Mesopotamia, it's along the coast for reasons of transportation, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. So what that really just says is that indeed, as we stand here today, the point of intersection of urbanization, of humanity is always around water. And that becomes a very important focal point. Now, secondly, is the challenge that we face of climate change. That although Africa is said to be the least responsible for climate change, it is actually said to be the one that would be most affected by it, with a large section of it within the high and extreme high risk zones. So now, of course, we talk about climate change, and for most of us, we're not really, climate change is this CO2 emission, it's all these scientific discussions. But what we begin to see on a day-to-day basis is conditions like this, conditions of flooding. A lot of cities all over the continent are constantly being flooded, and all over the world, as we see. I'm sure in the news you're probably hearing about Japan as we speak now. I like this image a lot because it really also shows not only the challenge, but the quality and the value and the nature of our people here, which is that every people are incredibly resilient and adaptable. And on one hand, you see these guys kind of trying to conquer the flooding with their SUVs, and these guys have taken this opportunity to be creative and beginning to create a new form of recreation, I guess. We are here in Nairobi, and right a few kilometers from you is a challenge of urbanization, which is a product of urbanization, Africa's largest urban slum, Kibera. I had the opportunity to visit it yesterday for the first time, and I was incredibly humbled, at the same time inspired. I found this incredibly resourceful and ingenious home by one of the residents that's completely built out of crap material. But he's still able to sort of include some artwork and literature all over it. The context of my project is in Africa's second largest city, Lagos. Lagos is a city incredibly growing with population currently around 20 million people, and is projected to even go higher. And this population growth and the changes in the economy of Africa is, of course, no news now. But what's interesting is that nearly only 15 years ago, The Economist published this cover of the hopeless continent, Africa, and 10 years later, Africa Rising. So suddenly, in the last decade, Africa, the continent, has undergone an incredible shift. And that became a question for me to look at what's happening in the continent. Why is this development happening so quickly? Where are these points of development? What are the development agents exactly, and who are the key players? I currently lead a research and design program at Cornell in the States, where we identified what we call the 7 decimal factors of development. Essentially, the first being demographics, the population growth, economics, social politics, infrastructure, morphology, environment, and resources. I'll quickly go through these ideas, but that there is a correlation between development, areas of growth, population growth, slum, and economic developments. We also know the key players in Africa with this, I think, caricature of an image, but it speaks a lot. Social politics, of course, the areas of conflicts, the political cycles, and how these has impact on development in each country. Infrastructure, where the infrastructure is being placed, and water being a very important part of that. Coastal cities, morphology, how these have also an impact on urbanization. Environment, the fact that the tropical belt, which you see here, is of course said to be the richest biodiversity, area of biodiversity in the world, and Africa has the largest part of that. And we're beginning to see shifts in the environmental conditions, even in this part of the Eastern Africa. And finally, of course, oil, resources, oil being one of the major products, and as we sit here today, I think the barrel of oil, which used to be over $100 per barrel, is I think less than 38 or 20 something, $38 now. So the dependence on oil would also, or the shift in that dependence is also a very important thing on that resource. So I launched in 2011 what I call the African Water Cities Project, which is really identifying 20 top African water cities, which are cities that really, with the intersection of the issues of urbanization and climate change. And we've begun research on 3 of those, and we're looking to, this is sort of a to-do list of the cities that we're going to be looking at, cities that are, say, top priorities. And we're about to publish a book that gathers all this information. So very quickly, this project is set in Lagos. Lagos is a city with more than 30%, or about 30% of the surface area covered by water. And right at the center of this is the lagoon, and in the lagoon is a settlement which is called Makoko. Makoko is a technical term, slum on water. It's said to have over nearly 100,000 people literally just living on water in conditions like this. The poor homes, of poor standards of living, very little infrastructure, almost no land, no services, no modern infrastructure. This is how people shop. This is how people get around in Makoko. And a few years ago, the state government decided that they would clear the community and make way for the sort of urban development, urban pressures that Lagos is experiencing. And that created quite a challenge for the community, and there were lots of conflicts, which we then decided that we should help address. And part of that was also the fact that there was a lot of flooding in the community. And this is a school which gets flooded, is built on reclaimed land. And when I visited the community, I was asked to help. And I said, well, of course, if I can learn from you, if I can learn how you have managed to build so much with so little, built this sort of maximum urbanization with, let's say, minimum means, I would, of course, be happy to help improve your conditions. And through research, development, through working with local partners, working with the community, learning how they have built so much, we looked at what the kind of typology of housing that they have, which is just houses on stilts. And because of the increase in rainfall and there's increase in sea level, they constantly get flooded. And then we decided, well, we should find a solution that is perhaps a sort of a global solution to that problem, and created this platform that adapts to the changing levels. And that really just produced a hybrid of a solution that is literally a triangle that floats on water. And while we're trying to understand how we can get this thing floating, we looked around and we saw these kids kind of floating on plastic barrels. I'm like, yes, that's it right there, where I really believe that every problem contains or suggests its solution. And of course, because Lagos is a port city, we've got loads of these recycled plastic barrels, which and local materials, bamboo, wood, floated again within the community. And we strapped a few of them together and we created this platform, and the kids jumped right on it like they always belong there. 16 of those were strapped together to create 100 square meters real estate, floating real estate, and we built this up into a structure. A triangular structure, of course, is the most stable for flotation because it has a low center of gravity and balance. And this was a Christmas party for the community already. And so that really produced a structure for the school called Makoko Floating School. It's a green building, naturally ventilated. It's got an open space on the ground floor, a closed space in the middle, and then a closed, semi-enclosed space in top. We're looking at using recycling water, collecting water, using solar panel for energy, and managing waste within the thing. So it's actually just the first, let's call it a minimal viable product. We built it. We actually didn't think about it alone. We just went there and we built it with the community. It's not perfect. It's actually far from perfect. It leaks, like most great architecture, but still has a huge impact on the community. It's a community center. Everyone loves it, and it sits within the city, within the community, almost as an icon. A new sort of this tallest building there. It's the largest building there. It's a public space. The students are now starting to attend school there. It's not just it's something that is not quite a building or quite a boat. It's a hybrid between it. It moves, so it's not really a typology that the government was very familiar with. So we're really we were operating within a gap, a policy gap in the system where, of course, you cannot build. There's no policy that supports a building on water, but there's also no policy that objects a boat on water. So the impact has been quite amazing. Of course, produced given the local economy, employment, a civic center, and all of that. And it's gotten a lot of global attention and a lot of visibility in the press, and publications, just hundreds, countless of publications. I guess this is also why I've had the opportunity to come here. Thank you very much, Quartz and GE, for the attendance, for the invitation. And all of this has actually led to the government to reconsider the community and think, well, wait, maybe why not? Why don't we think about this differently? Why don't we think about this as a solution? And This is a press briefing by the government that now they have said they would regenerate the area, and the picture of the school is there as a possible solution. So today we've just built one, and our idea is that, of course, it's a school, but it could be used as a hospital, as a clinic, as a home, and tomorrow that this could be a new form of architecture and urbanism to address development on water. And we're not inventing anything particularly new. We're just doing something that is perhaps for the context. Venice is a city on water. Amsterdam, where I also partly live, is a city on water. Chicago is a city where I work. It's also a city on water. And we do other things besides a floating school. We also address issues around water. This is a radio station in Port Harcourt that is an amphibious structure. And the second one here is Rock. It's a pavilion that is in Chicago. We're building in Chicago now. We basically found some historic limestone rocks around the area and put it together and hung it over the cliff, and that's what we have. So the question is, what if? What if we begin to think of a new form of urbanism, where, of course, it has the areas for the high-rise buildings and low-rise areas, and as you move away from the coast, you begin to create new forms of living, structures that are on stilts, structures that are along the waterfront, and until you get further and further apart, you create recreational facilities, even swimming pools, parks, areas, housing, agriculture, and all kinds of things that essentially would produce a new form of architecture, a new form of building and living on water, perhaps what we could allude to an African water city, an African solution. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a conversation between Kunle Adeyemi and Yinka Adegoke.
Hello, Kunle, that was amazing. That was an amazing presentation. There's so many questions. But we talked briefly earlier, and I just wanted to touch a little bit on the kind of the politics and the history of some of this stuff. We're both from Lagos. We know the sort of the history of the city. 25 years ago, there was another slum, partly on water, Marocco, and that got completely razed to the ground. I mean, what's the end game with this work that you do? What is the hope here? I mean, it was great to see Lagos State sort of coming around, but for you, how do you see the end game?
Well, I think it's always important to address challenges and harness opportunities. And for me, the end game is that there are some very clear challenges that are both local and global, and urbanization is one. And Makoko presents what I think is an insight to a solution. It's not perfect, it's far from perfect, but it is a place we can learn from and produce a solution which I think, if carefully and properly implemented, could be a provide a win-win situation for both the community and the government of Lagos State and for the rest of the world.
So is there any sort of plan for people to secure land tenure on this?
Yeah, that would be it. I mean, I think obviously one of the challenges is that they are an informal settlement, and there are processes for giving tenureship or creating. I think that's a discussion. There are many scenarios that we can imagine for solving that problem in Makoko, but the most important point is that the community of over 100,000 people, which is a civilization in itself. We're terrestrial people. We love to live on land, But apparently there are people that love to live on water, and you should let them live on water. So, but they need to live in a condition that is healthy and it's suitable and it's sustainable. And we're trying to help develop that, learning from them. And so even if they have to be moved to a new settlement, they need to be moved to a water settlement. And this is perhaps a solution.
So you would say, I mean, that's interesting, because these are clearly some of the poorest people in the city.
Arguably.
Yes, arguably. And one, I guess one sometimes imagines when you see these settlements that they're living there because they kind of have to. And you seem to be, what you seem to be saying is they kind of live there because they want to live on water?
Yes, I mean, they're a fishing community by traditionally. So they you know, most of them, the men go out fishing, and the women, they smoke the fish, and they, you know, Makoko actually produces processes nearly a third of Lagos's fish supply. So that fresh fish pepper soup you think you're enjoying there is from Makoko. So I mean, it has a whole economy in itself where I think needs to be preserved and even developed.
Right. Yeah. And just finally on this, how do you, I guess we're coming back to the same thing, but how do you define success with the whole project?
Well, I mean, it's a long. I mean, this is a long process. It's a lifetime of work, and success for. I would start with success for the people who live there, and I think the fact that they are at a point where the government is having a rethink of their existence there is a great deal of success. I think having legitimacy, which has been supported through this project and many other initiatives, is already success. I think one day the dream is that they actually have better homes, better facilities, and that you and I and the rest of the world can come visit Makoko.
Right.
That would be success.
Yeah, that's true. Just switching gears slightly, I just wanted to talk about African cities in general, and particularly in the context of urban planning. As you travel around the continent, what are the biggest challenges you see in terms of urban planning for African cities?
Well, I mean, I think one of the challenges, of course, it goes back to the issue of urbanization. The fact that, you know, urban growth is exceeding urban development, and this is a challenge that the government is also encountering, and that's why slums are being produced, because, you know, people are just moving so quickly, and population growth and migration, and you can't produce infrastructure to support that growth. So planning, as we know it, you know, cannot be implemented because you can't respond quickly enough. And so for me, I think we should reverse that proposition and think about what people are doing themselves, look at the ingenuity of the people themselves, and the entrepreneurship of the people that are already, I mean, what they're doing, and see how we can develop that. So it's more of a grassroots approach to planning and development rather than the top-down. Right. I would say it's really, you know, it has to be done from both directions. It's not really bottom-up alone or top-down.
Right.
Top-down, bottom-up approach.
Yeah, because I'm wondering how practical that is.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, one thing I mean, what's certainly has not been practical is top-down planning. You know, it's just before roads are built, you know, before anything is done, the city has taken over. People are already doing other things. So I think we have to rethink that approach to planning, basically empowering people at the grassroots level.
Are there any cities, you know, as you travel, are there any cities you see on the continent that are doing things right in terms of allowing this kind of mix of organic and planned?
Well, I mean, I think there are several countries. I won't mention names just so we don't create conflicts here. I would go out of the continent, and one city that is reportedly doing very well with that approach is Medellin in Colombia.
Okay.
And I'm particularly inspired by what the mayor's approach has been to development. And he said, we will build our most beautiful buildings in our poorest areas. I mean, I think that is very important and, you know, very insightful way of developing the poorest areas. You inject it with something that attracts interest to it, and then it itself catalyzes change.
Have you seen that work before, outside of Ajay?
I think we're starting to see it work in Makoko.
Okay.
If I may say so humbly.
Again, to something that you touched on in your presentation,
Yeah.
and it's all part of the same planning conversation,
Yeah.
which is just this rapid growth of population.
Yes.
I think 40% of the world's population will be in Africa by 2050. And as you said, 70% of people in the world will live in cities.
Yeah.
What should African governments be doing to prepare themselves for these approaches? What could be an opportunity or a challenge?
Yeah, I think because the challenge itself is population growth, it's the agglomeration of humans. I think the more the governments or the more the leaders or even ourselves begin to look at ways of harnessing human capital as a primary resource, the more we stand chances of actually addressing those challenges. It's not, I mean, infrastructure, all of these things are also important, but human capital, what are human beings, what are people doing, and what are they doing well, and how can we promote those things?
It looks like we've run out of time. I think I could have spent another 30, 40 minutes.
Please welcome Sarah Menka, founder and CEO of Grow Intelligence.
One second. I know. Sarah, thank you for being here. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Is your mic
I think
working?
we're good. Yeah,
Okay, great.
I think so. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Okay, so Sarah and I did this same chat in New York. I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, and I think we enjoyed talking with each other so much. We thought, why not do it again in Nairobi? And in all seriousness, the reason we really wanted to do this again was because it was such an insightful and interesting look at an entrepreneur trying to develop a new type of business. So Sarah used to be on Wall Street, was a commodities trader. You're originally from Ethiopia, and you packed it all up and moved to Nairobi to start your business, Grow Intelligence. Now, I think because your business is kind of one of those low-profile but very important businesses, I'm going to let you explain how it works, and then I'm just going to follow up with this question.
Okay. So Grow Intelligence is a data analytics company focused on the agricultural industry. And we kind of operate off the one premise that to create efficient agricultural markets, you need high quality data and information. And we started when I was a commodities trader in New York, as Yinka said. I started looking at investing in African agriculture. And I discovered very fast that information was incredibly difficult to come by. And when you did find it, putting it together, deciphering it, computing it was incredibly difficult. And so therefore, is really the underlying theory was the cost of capital was simply too high for access to agriculture. That's the main bottleneck. But to actually increase capital flows in agricultural markets, you need really good data, good information, but really a common language that lets that information exist in a single place. And so we set out to build a company that did just that. And so we sit at this really interesting intersection between engineering, big data, design, and domain expertise. So our teams are designed in that way as well, where it's kind of this harmonious interaction between the three to create a really simple data product that a multitude of users from governments to investors can use, but everyone can ultimately start to finally use the same numbers and discover information in a much more seamless manner.
Yeah, and I think that was the most fascinating thing about what you're doing. We talked a lot about where you get the data from. And I was also talking even as journalists, as we try to tell stories at Quartz Africa and Quartz in general, finding data, accurate data, in many countries is difficult. So can you just talk us through the process of how you find the data you use, and then how you process that and perhaps create?
Yeah. So I guess let's start with defining data, right? Mm-hmm. So data sits as how we think of it, which is in structured databases, and you ping the number, it spits something out. Data is also information. It's text reports that people write but contain interesting pieces of information. Data is also images that tell us stories around how plants are doing and the crop health is doing. So data is a multitude of text-based, numerical-based, and image-based information. Where we get it from, if you can think of agriculture, what makes agriculture incredibly difficult and complicated is that it covers everything from cotton to cocoa. And so unlike if you think of oil is produced around the world. There's thousands of different grades of oil, but a single set of rules govern the way it's produced. You drill it, you just figure out what drill bits you need, etc., transport it, but it's the same set of rules. Growing cotton has a very different set of rules than growing cocoa, than coffee, corn, wheat, etc. And so the way that we produce it is highly fragmented in nature. It's highly distributed, it's global, and the way we consume it is that way. So information about it resides in exactly that same sort of distributed manner. So data doesn't come from a single place. Data comes from all these little pockets of information that are relevant to each one of those markets. And then what we do is we say, you discover a multitude of sources. The main thing now is that none of these sources use the same language to actually classify that information. So what we've designed is a classification system where any form of information that has to do with agriculture can map to our classification system so that users can actually start to compare apples to apples. That's one of the most complicated things to achieve today, is that if you went to the Ministry of Agriculture for Kenya, Brazil, and the US, everybody has their own set of rules and standards for how they collect it, how they store it. And so it's really normalizing that process. And then once you've done that, is then saying, okay, how do I deliver that to a user in a really seamless and fast manner? So it's kind of a three-step process.
Without being too wonky, could you just talk a little bit about how you get some of the data, like the weather, the sort of the images you talked about? Because it's not as if this stuff is just sitting out there in an open file for you to collect, or some of it is? Or
that's what's amazing, right? Is that there's so much of it just sitting out there. People don't know it exists because it's sat largely within the hands of scientific communities that have published research reports or academic papers on it, but not much practical has been done to really distill the science into something usable for the average person. So, with weather data, we basically tap into satellites around the world and ingest the images and then translate those images into something numerical and ingestible for users. So what's the health of a crop? How much rainfall? What's the temperature? It's also weather stations. There's, I think, a network of 150,000 weather stations that spit out data. So there's really a lot of information out there, and it is largely just sitting out there.
Right.
There's information we get which we go to private providers and do a licensing agreement, but there's a huge amount of information and data that's sitting, that's just in the open data space.
I guess what you're saying is some of this data or information is out there but it's not being used dynamically. It's just sort of sitting in.
It's also incredibly difficult to access, right?
see.
So, I mean, I think at this point we're probably sitting at a petabyte of data and growing very fast. A computer, a single person that needs to know at any given point in time, say you're an investor looking at agricultural opportunities in 3 different continents. If you want to know how much a particular district or county in a country received rainfall for X period of time, and then how did that translate to some sort of crop health, to do that type of analysis takes, it's actually quite impossible for an average person. You're not a scientist today. So it's taking that to like a product where I guess if you know the question you ask, then you can generate those responses very easily.
And I guess this is kind of like the money pitch, right? Which is just to talk about the value of what's, the value of the opportunity that you're creating here, or that you're hoping to create as you build the business. How it helps, what sectors it helps, who it helps.
Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, we started as an Africa-focused business. I really started this because I believed Africa was the one continent in the world that needed a product like this, but that also had the greatest growth opportunity in the sector. Yeah. We've now expanded beyond Africa to launch a global product in about 3 weeks. But I still think that one of the most exciting places in that money pitch is 65% of Africa's labor force is in agriculture. Less than 1% of outstanding commercial bank loans today are actually to the agricultural sector. So to me, I always say if we could move that 1% and help move it to 5%, I can sleep well. It feels like you're dreaming small, but at the same time, it's just such a huge push to make, and it's not one that a single company alone can do. So,
and this is, and the point you're making is that investors, when they have data, when they have the information, it's a lot easier to take a bet, to take a risk.
Yeah, because ultimately, agricultural markets are highly, highly volatile. They're volatile for 2 reasons. One piece of that puzzle is information asymmetry. A few people in markets control really large amounts of information that they can trade on, and therefore there's extreme volatility between the producer and the market. The second is this exogenous factor we can't really control for, called weather and climate and environment. And so to the extent that we can reduce information asymmetry associated with markets and provide clarity around environment and weather, I think we're basically helping solve that problem dynamically via the markets. Right?
So who are the clients?
So clients are who I mentioned. It's governments, it's corporates, it's hedge funds. For us, it's about servicing. If you think of the farmer and the amount of work going into producing products for farmers, because our belief is that the farmer needs information. But that's actually built on an assumption that everyone that serves the farmer, from government to investor to processor that buys from the farmer, is actually really well informed. And the truth is they aren't, because no one's actually using that same language. So we're just trying to make the system that sits around the farmer really efficient. And so for us to be really successful, we actually need all 3 verticals to start using the same pieces of information.
Okay, that might go up.
Yeah, I think we're back on.
In terms of investors using this information, I actually just wanted to go back to the point about farmers. So will small-scale farmers or even mid-sized, large farmers, will they have access to this platform? Is it the kind of thing that...
The first version of our platform is largely an enterprise platform. It's not designed for mobile. It's web-based. It's web-based. It's username, password, you get your own login, you can sign up for it and access it. What we hope to do is, as we scale it, is figure out ways of creating micro versions of that product that can be used. But we have a huge battle to fight around that ecosystem that I think there are many great companies doing work targeting farmers, and so we have to spend time figuring out, which battle you want to fight. Otherwise, the problem is just too large.
Yeah. And lastly, because we're running out of time, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the importance of innovation within a business like yours. Because how old is the business? 2 years old? Yeah. Where does innovation sit in your list of priorities in running your business?
Well, I guess you can ask my team that. You're building something out of nothing, right? I mean, I think that's what I always relate this entire process to. For me, it was about packing my bags, moving to a new place, establishing a life, and then figuring out what to do, right? So there was that first chunk of risk that I largely took by myself. And then after that, you get a group of amazing people and get them to believe in something, and then get them to believe that what you're building is so important that, for all of us, since the beginning of last year, we've been locked up in a room designing and coding product without a single thing to be able to show, right? And it's the belief that something is coming. And so we're, finally about to cross that path, and we've gotten great feedback along the way. But I think that's ultimately what it is, right? It's like giving birth in some ways.
Right.
It's just
So it's in a way you seem to be saying that people on your team need to have almost an innovative philosophy. This is the challenge. We're creating something new.
Yeah, we're not trying to emulate anything that's out there. So one of our biggest challenges is people always want to know, you are the this of this, right? And I don't have that answer. And part of it is actually that you want to start creating a new industry, a new market, a new way of doing things. And so, yeah, it's...
So you're not Uber for agriculture?
Can't help you.
Sarah, as ever, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah McCain.
Please welcome Boniface Mwangi, founder of Power 254.
You're good? Can you hear me? Great. So let's play the video.
Every day, it surprises me the number of people I see on the streets of Nairobi. They could all be artists. And for the longest time, whether you're a graffiti artist, a musician, a filmmaker, a poet, we never really had a place where we could go and just do what we do. It was really difficult to find a place where we could work and collaborate with others. And I think we finally found that place in Power 254.
When I became a photographer, there was no place for people like me. I wanted to learn. There was no school for photography, and I struggled to learn. When I was employed, there was no one to mentor me, there was no one to guide me, and I struggled a lot. So when I made it as a photographer, I wanted a community where I could actually belong, a place where I could hang out, and there's no place like that. A place where, yes, you love photography, but don't you actually exchange ideas, learn from another person, talk about your struggles, because everyone has their unique struggles in their career.
Well, you see, love makes you do crazy things. Ask my shoes, where is a Giatu? And what I went through to buy you those rings. Ask my shoes, where is a Giatu?
Power, actually, I like to think of it as a collaborative space for creatives. It works in two main ways. The first way is by offering a platform where people can come freely and interact with each other. And these people are the creatives.
And the second bit is through programs. And through these programs, we have people attend workshops, we have master classes, we have roundtable events, we have outreach programs. Not only do you come to a free space, you also come to a space where you can get more skills.
The main concept or most ideas I got from the whole lecture thing was the perception that comes out in...
I only have 10 minutes, so I have to use my time very well. So growing up, we had one president. His name was Moi. And Moi used to give this analogy in his political rallies that Kenyans are like chicken. Because if you go to the market and you buy a chicken, you take it home and you feed it and you give it maize, you normally put a string on it. After 3-4 days, a week, the chicken gets used to eating the maize, and every time it tries to go, the string tugs it back, it never leaves. And after maybe 2 weeks, you cut the string, the chicken will never leave, because in its mind it has a string. And that's what we try, that's what happens in this country, that we are free, we have a new constitution, Moi is no longer in power, the country is progressing, but every single day we behave like chicken, because in our minds we have this string. Having lived under Moi for 24 years, and that's when I grew up, we got used to being arrested if you protest. People used to disappear, there was detention without trial, people were killed. And when Moi left and the country was free, we never realized we're free, because in our mind we're like that chicken. There's a string in our leg. And so what I do every single day, and why we exist as power, is that we're trying to empower young people to liberate their minds, to decolonize the mind, to realize that they're free and they can do whatever they want to do. And the whole idea of actually power to exist, actually, we empower people with skills, we train them in how they can be able to earn a living from the skill. Every single day when I wake up, I don't wake up to go to protest. That's what I do. Kenyans have this perception, oh, I protest every single day. We give the government trouble every day. We don't do that. We wake up every single day to empower people, liberate people, and ensure that their minds are free to be able to do what they want to do, and to be able to stand up for their rights and to defend themselves when they get attacked by the government or the police, who are very brutal in their behavior every single day. And the other thing actually is to question our leadership. When growing up, we had our curriculum was done by the British, and they did it to ensure that Kenyans produce servants and civil servants and people who obey. So culturally, it is wrong to question leadership. It's wrong to ask questions. There's a saying that the rich man fat doesn't smell, so we only elect rich people because their fat never smells. So they steal, and they sit in the room and they fat, and you never say it. And the fat here symbolizes corruption and theft. It's very, very difficult to find a young Kenyan asking or calling out the leaders on their face. They don't do that. So we may be very active on social media. We may have a very big following on social media, but whenever we do an action or decide to question the government, in person we never do it, because we grew up with this being told that you have to respect the leadership. You have to be respectful to authority. In this country and this continent, there's so many churches, and every Sunday you go to church, they tell you leadership is God appointed. God appoints and anoints leaders. What that means, even when the leader is wrong, he's God's anointed, which is not true. Because if you go to Europe, you realize that they have less churches, they have fewer churches, and they have results. You come to a continent, we have many, many churches, and between Europe and Africa, Africa prays more. But Europe gets the results because they do what they pray about, and they don't even have to pray about it, you just have to do it. And that's what we're trying to do in our work. Guys ask us why do we do, this video is a bit longer, we do shock value protests. And the question is, why do we do that? We work on very low budgets, like with no money, and we need a message to spread across the country. So we do something that is going to shock the country and get people talking about it. And you have realized the power of art and symbolism, that when you tell someone to read a book, maybe they wouldn't read the book. If you tell someone that to read a press release, they won't do it. But if you deliver pigs to parliament and say that's greed, they get it, and they talk about it. The president talk about it, whoever the media will talk about it. My grandmother back up country does not read, does not write, but she'll hear about it on the radio. And we have these conversations going, because the only way you can liberate the mind is to actually give them something else to talk about. So you tell them, yes, the rich man fat does smell. The rich man can be guilty. Even if they don't get jailed, you don't have to elect them. Because we live in a continent where they say all the time that you are guilty until proven rich. Kenya is 52 years old. Kenya is 52 years old, and we have never jailed a single big thief. They get a slap on the wrist and they walk away. Every year, the government says you have lost billions. There's a scandal going on. I can see the CS is here. Thank you for coming. And I'd like her to respond to these things. And what I'm saying, the country that we live in, there's theft and theft and theft. And as Audio Color said, all you do is step aside. That's the quote in Kenya. You step aside, and then you get cleansed, then you come back into power. This country, the most attacked person, or the most vulnerable person, the person who faces a lot of trouble, is a witness against a powerful person, because you have no protection. They claim they have state witness protection in word, but they never do it. So our work exists to tell them, actually, we are not afraid. I grew up being told, "Kigoyaki no kagiranyina." Well, that means the coward goes home to his mother or her mother. And the idea was that if you don't speak out, you won't get jailed. If you don't speak out, you get arrested. If you don't speak out, you won't die. But we're saying, actually, we have to speak up, because if we don't, we're going to leave our country to our kids, and they'll be fighting the same battles. The reason why I stand here today, and the reason why Kenya is still corrupt, is because our parents were those cowards who never fought back, who were silent, who never spoke when the rich man fat was smelling, when the money was stolen, when the land was stolen, when the land was grabbed, they were very silent about it. We are trying to raise a generation that actually makes money from their art, because that's what we do every single day. We make money from the art that we do. But beyond that, we ensure that we must be active citizens. Oriokol is going to come after me. She's a lawyer, works for Media Network, but she's also active. We're telling people you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be an engineer, you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, you can be a mechanic, a Kali informal sector person, but you must also be an active citizen. You must be patriotic. You must stand up for what you believe in. You're trying to cultivate that kind of boldness, telling people we're no longer chickens. Yes, maybe we were chicken when Moi was alive. Moi is still alive, he's not dead. But when he was in sorry, Moi. Is my time up? No, I was saying, so when Moi was there, yes, we were chicken, but right now we have that space to do the things that we do, that I can actually speak my mind and go home to my family. It's a good thing. As I finish, because I know my time is up, so the African continent and the challenges that we're facing right now is like a river. It's extremely dirty, very dirty. And the thing is, you can never empty a river. But the only thing you can be able to do to a river is add clean water. And what we're trying to do is actually, we are saying we are the clean water. We can clean the system. We are pushing young people to say teaching them values and things that they can do in a different way, telling them that this country belongs to us. And the only way we can clean this country is to get involved, stop being afraid. And as the end, I'd like to quote Thomas Sankara, one of the guys that I look up to, an amazing young man who came into power in 1983 in a country called Upper Volta, changed the country to Burkina Faso, the land of the upright people, the land of the righteous people. And he said, it took the madmen of yesterday for us to be able to act with extreme clarity today. I want to be one of those madmen. We must dare to invent the future. I would like to dare you to invent the future, because we can reclaim back our continent. The slideshow of poverty, inequality, and where we're saying that only Africa has bad leadership, we can change that by taking a stand and refusing to be chicken and cowards. Thank you.
Please welcome Bobby Ghosh, Editor-in-Chief of Quartz Events.
Thanks very much, Boniface. That was wonderful. How come you're not in jail?
I got released yesterday.
Yeah, what happened?
So a friend of mine was arrested for not having his ID, identification card, and he was locked up. I went to the police station to ask why he was locked up, because it's not illegal not to have an identification card. He's a Kenyan, and I got locked up as well.
And that was lockup number?
The 2-minute count. The first time I was locked up was 11 years old. So it's like a lifetime journey of being locked up.
Frequent flyer miles. 9 lockups and the 10th one is free.
No, you get used. So every time I go to the cell, I know you have to remove one shoe, you have to remove your belt. But yesterday there was so much hurry to throw me in. They threw me in with my phone, everything. And I was able to actually record videos for the first time in a police cell.
Well, you talked about the value of shock in getting the message across. You've also, of course, used social media to make your point, to get your point across. And in that sense, although you have your own unique style, that is something we've noticed in the last 4 or 5 years, people around the world using social media as a revolutionary tool. But more recently, in the past 2 years or so, we've noticed a counter attack from governments, from authoritative governments, who are themselves learning how to use social media as an instrument of oppression. Talk a little bit about how you overcome that. It was one thing when the government was ignorant about it, but now they're getting smarter.
Actually, our government has a digital team. They have a room where they have guys trolling you with laptops and with a brief to drown you. So today those are, actually, I'll give an example of today. There was a hashtag, I think, Sako Igoro, that's the CS. And then there was another one. What was the counter, Ori? The counter hashtag? She blew the whistle. She was the whistleblower. And what you've realized is actually that the government has seen the power of social media. So what they're able to do is actually either drown you by employing more people to actually tweet about it. But I think the power behind social media is that you don't need to go to a radio station or a TV station or a newspaper to actually say what you have to say. So it has actually given powers to average citizens to speak out. Yes, they can use it to oppress or drown you, because in Kenya they don't really oppress. They may arrest you for a tweet, and then you get, because you have very liberal courts at the moment. So even if they want to jail you, they can't jail you because the courts don't work for them. The court works for the people. But the power behind social media cannot be silenced by a government, no matter how strong it is, or no matter how powerful they are.
You started out famously, you became an activist after your experience in the violence here after the elections of 2008. You were a photojournalist before then. Do you see yourself still as a journalist at all, or has that part of you now faded into the background?
I still write sometimes when someone is willing to pay. I still take pictures. I do private projects and personal projects. So, but there's now, the problem is that in another country or in a developed country, you can be a journalist and an activist at the same time. You can actually have an opinion about things. The problem is when you have an opinion about here, the people then say you're not balanced, because they have learned that you're not supposed to have an opinion if you have a career. And I believe that you can actually have a career and have an opinion at the same time. So am I still a photographer? Yes. Am I still a journalist? Yes, I still am.
Since when you first came into the sort of international limelight with your activism, you inspired people from other countries. They reached out to you to try and learn, try and understand what you were doing. What, since that initial period, what lessons have you learned about activism that you can now teach others?
Patience. I thought change was an event, that you actually go do one thing and people are going to get it. But I've learned, painfully so, that it's a very slow, painful process, that you need to be able to recharge and have a bigger plan and not be reactive. So we used to do protests because you're reacting to the government, we are reacting to corruption, we're reacting to an event, and we realize, yes, you need to react at the same time, but you need to actually do the long term. I'm asking myself, where do I want to see this country in 30 years or 20 years? What do I want my kids to be able to do? And where do they take over? So instead of actually thinking about a protest as an event, you think of a protest as a build up to a bigger thing. So you have to look at a bigger picture, because if you do not, you burn out. The other lessons that we learned from Egypt, Tunisia, Libya is that it was an armed revolution. Tunisia is where they were able to actually overthrow Ben Ali's government. But the young people who went to the streets did not take power because they're not ready for power. So the president of Tunisia right now is an 8-year-old man who was in Ben Ali's government, because the survivors always come back. You go to Egypt, you realize where the young people went to Tahrir Square. Yes. They wanted Mubarak out. They protested. Mubarak left. They didn't have a political party. They're not organized to take over power. So who gets in? They get Morsi. They realize they don't like Morsi and his Islamic stance. So what do? They go back to Tahrir Square. They throw him out. Who comes? Who's organized? The Sisi. And the thing is, you cannot protest without an agenda. You cannot just go and try to say, we don't want this. What do you want? So I think in protest and in activism, you need to tell people, yes, you're opposing this, but you stand for this. And that's why it's saying that the dirty African river or the dirty Kenyan river can only be cleaned when people who have values and are willing to say, this is how much I own, this is who I am, this is what I represent, this is what I stand for, can actually go for elective office.
That's an interesting point, because I remember having these conversations with with the Tahrir Square youth leadership, when they did remove initially Mubarak, they were reluctant to get into politics themselves. They didn't have the organization. They didn't think that they were ready for that. Are you getting ready for that? Is Power 254 a political platform? Will it become a party one day?
No.
And if not, why not? If you say that that's
it will
important.
never become a political party.
Okay.
That's from me. The people that we mentor, the people that we're actually trying to train can become politicians. But if they ever become politicians, they must be able to sign an MOU with the Kenyan people. I think there's a way people just vibe because they have money. People vibe because they think they're ambitious. People vibe because they feel like they're owed that position. That needs to stop. If you're going to vie, it's public service. And you say, what do I stand for? What do I represent? What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? So that we hold them accountable when they get elected.
So do you see yourself as a kingmaker in the future, if not the king?
I don't think so. I play my small role as a photographer and as an activist, but I think the task is bigger than me. So it's not about me, it's about the people that I work with and this country that we love very much. And when people question that if you're patriotic enough, they need to look at the work that we do. Who benefits? It's the Kenyan people.
The challenge is to get young people politically engaged, right? There's a lot of cynicism, not just here, around the world, young people. They look at what happened in Egypt, they look at what happened in Libya, and they say revolutions don't necessarily work. How do you get them to go past that? How do you get over that hump?
We need to talk about a ballot revolution. So street revolution, no, because that's instability, that doesn't work. Yes. What you need is a ballot revolution, where you say we have an agenda and this is what you want. I think young people are politically inclined, but the thing is they're tribally inclined. So Kenya is tribal politics. If you look at the last election and how people voted, it was a tribal census. If you look at the last man, people are voting tribally. Yeah. And so you need to be actually change the mind to a level where they vote on values and manifestos and policies and what people represent. So you need to change the way they think to this other level of thinking, and that takes time. So 2017, what's going to happen? Maybe you'll get 1 or 2 people who are clean to go in there, hold them accountable. I believe in disruption. So Malema is not a good example, but I think Julius Malema is a good disruptor in the way he's doing stuff. He may not be the most cleanest person. He has a very bad past, but the people that he works with and the idea that he presents is a good idea. Is he the right person? No. But guess what? Before you get the saints and the messiahs and all those things, you have to work with an in-between. And Malema is the in-between for South Africa.
Is there an in-between for
yet to be discovered?
Boniface Mwangi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please welcome Bright Simons, founder of MP Degree.
Thank you all so much. So many have come. It's an exciting day. I'm going to start by trying to tell you a story. And this is a true story, though. It starts a few decades ago in Southeast Asia, Mekong area, Cambodia, Thailand, that part of the world. And for those of you familiar with that story, you know it doesn't end very well. It starts with the discovery by some medical practitioners and scientists that though people were taking anti-malaria medicine that elsewhere were of good potency, for some reason in that part of the world, they just weren't working. And it's often not clear why they were not working. Of course, you want to look into the genetics of it, you want to look into the specific epidemiology of the region, etc. But notwithstanding all that, increasingly became quite clear that something else was at foot. It turned out that for most people in that part of the world, when they walk into a pharmacy or a clinic and they receive medicine, they were often gambling with their lives. Anybody who has stayed in this continent for quite a while has been prescribed something that looks like this at some point in their life, an anti-malarial drug. The only problem is that, as you can see, a good chunk of the time, you have absolutely no idea what you're actually getting. Because they look exactly like the original, except that these copies can be extremely dangerous to your health. What have we discovered in them? Quite a bit. carcinogenic compounds, the paint that you use to paint your house, rat poison, 13 compounds that I dare not name have all been discovered in these fake medicines that first surfaced a couple of decades ago in Southeast Asia, where entrepreneurs, not like many of you in this room, began to play with the lives of millions and millions and millions of people. But it stayed under the radar for many, many years until finally this problem began to hit the West. In the United States of America, we've seen increasing numbers of incidents involving fake insulin, the stuff you use for diabetes, fake anti-cancer drugs, fake treatments for diabetes, etc. And then it hit Europe as well. But the important thing that you have to notice is that it's not just about medicines. It's about everything you can think of. What you're looking there is a fake Ferrari from Spain. Any Ferrari lovers from here? Fake Aston Martin also from Spain. And it's got to the point where we have fake dinosaur bones. Fake fossils. The way I see it, if it hasn't got a fake version, it isn't real. And the way that these things normally work in the so-called developed world, as somebody rightly pointed out earlier on, is when a problem surfaces, an industry also surfaces. And as you might expect, these problems have competing solutions, such as RFID. Putting an electronic chip into every pack of medicine or product that is susceptible to counterfeiting as it moves through the supply chain. And the consumer being able to use a device at the location that they buy that product to verify. This has been promoted widely across the West as a potential solution to this problem. The problem is that some of these solutions, in my view, are more frightening than the problem. Because if we were to look at RFID very seriously, we probably will have to contend with a world in which the price of medicine can triple. And we already live in a world where the majority of the people cannot afford to buy medicine, to use medicine as the main issue under discussion in relation to this subject. But what was fascinating from my research was we got to a situation where, for one particular type of solution, the hologram, which almost everybody here has ever seen, either on a product, a consumer product, or indeed on a medicine, started to become itself the mechanism by which the counterfeiters were perpetrating this fraud. You know how? They started to put holograms on products that originally did not have holograms. So you walk into the market and you pick up the fake, thinking you've got a genuine one. It's not therefore surprising that despite a decade in the most advanced economies of this world of trying to come up with a comprehensive solution that enable people to detect if they've got counterfeit medicines, after a decade of consistent, after a decade of accelerated efforts in places like California, Florida, and the rest, a solution is nowhere in sight in the West. That is the truth. And if this problem was to get out of hand in the West, quite certainly the infrastructure that exists today would not allow patient-level detection. And we've already seen it in California, where the attempt to solve this problem has been postponed 3 times over the course of a decade. So imagine how, if you were a multinational CEO, well informed about this problem and its complexities, and you will be told that some startup made up of some 2 people in some obscure country called Ghana, which you confuse with Guyana, have a solution to the problem that can cost 1/10 of everything else you've been shown. Skepticism, cynicism, naturally. But that's exactly what has happened. Since 2010, over the course of just 2 years, Nigeria has become the first country in the world to serialize its entire anti-malarial supply chain, to the point where today, every Nigerian, regardless of economic background and circumstance, can go into a pharmacy, pick up a pharmaceutical that is an anti-malarial, and with their mobile phone, validate instantly that that particular product came from the right source and that that particular product is likely to do them good rather than harm. 2 years, not a single dollar spent by the government. A cost to the industry that is so insignificant that prices of medicine have stayed stable and below the rise of inflation. I call this a crazy solution. How does it work? Every anti-malaria in Nigeria, and increasingly in several other countries around the world, have 2 identifiers on them: a password and a decryptor. And when the patient or the consumer receives the product, they are able to send the password to a 911 type number, and within 2 seconds, decryption happens on the back end, and a response is delivered to the phone that satisfies a number of important prerequisites and parameters. One, was that medicine made by the person or the company or the organization that claims it made that medicine? 2, has anything happened since that medicine left the factory for which reason there is any basis to doubt the authenticity of that medicine? 3, has there been any intelligence discovered in the neighborhood where that medicine is circulated, for which reason it is best to advise the patient not to take the medicine? And several other parameters. If met, the patient is assured instantly that they can indeed take that medicine. But what is more beautiful is that all this data is flowing into a repository backed by some of the most fascinating algorithms that you can think of, that is aiming to do one thing: to predict where the next counterfeit drug will be found. I think this is also crazy, because I've heard so much hype about big data all over the world. I am yet to encounter a product in the market backed by big data that touches my life as a product that can tell a mother before they walk into a pharmacy with a young child to get an antibiotic for the child's infection. So if big data, before it's even blossomed in the most powerful and the richest nations in the world, is already going to warn Nigerian mothers about the safety of medicines they have not yet bought, then there's no other adjective to describe it rather than crazy. Which is why I believe that African innovation ecosystem, its processes, its dynamics is best described by the idea of the divine madness. Anyone who has seen a fetish priest, an African spiritualist, an African spiritual agent of any kind, in performance, in full trance, invoking the ancestors and the gods of his forefathers, if any of you have seen it, it looks like madness. But there's a method to that madness. A method only revealed through the divine consciousness of communal thinking. The one aspect of this solution that I did not describe, and the only reason it's been successful, is because inherently it's a communal system where the people of Nigeria, with their governments, their corporations, etc., have come together and woven a solution that genuinely saves lives. Thank you.
Please welcome Bobby Ghosh, Editor-in-Chief of Quartz Events.
Thank you. That was divinely inspired.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump straight into what you told me just before the event. You're just returning here from Bombay.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And this gets to the heart of what we were saying at the beginning of the event today, which is African solutions for the world's problems. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing in India.
So India is one of the biggest sources for generic medicines.
Yes.
Now, generic medicines are medicines that are not innovator medicines in the sense that they were not discovered afresh. So somebody else discovered the medicine. By the way the patent system works, they must disclose how they make it. After a period of time, that protection ends and anybody can make that medicine. Yes. And India has become the biggest source of these kinds of medicines, often saving the world's health systems maybe 90% of the cost that ordinarily would be the case if we were using only innovator medicines. Most of these medicines come to Africa and the Middle East where we work. So it was obvious to us from the very start that if we were going to make the impact we wanted to make, we needed to have an operation in India. So we started in Bangalore, like everybody in IT does, Karnataka, yeah. And we started with one person saying, look, we have some clients in Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya who very often get their medicines from India and require that we integrate our operations in India. What is not evident when you look at this is the entire industrial mechanisms behind the bar that enable you to actually put those passwords on the medicines. Very elaborate. So if we had somebody there who could go talk to these factories and the rest, our work would be much easier. It turned out to be the case that actually, once some of these companies saw the system actually working in Africa, they felt that they could use it also in India and in other ways, not only for protecting against counterfeiting, but very often for traceability as well, for finding out where is my medicine, who bought it, when did they buy, etc. And that kind of intelligence was not available. So eventually, not only did we have an operation in India, but we had to spread out across India, east, west, north. So we have 3 offices now, 3 functional units, and they're doing very well.
And you're sticking with pharmaceuticals?
We started with pharmaceuticals. Now we're in 13 different industries, including automotive, agrochemicals. We are doing garments. We are doing textiles. The usual way that we describe how we select the industries we enter is that industry producing products that touches the very lives of people. So you can think of automotive. If you've got a fake ball bearing, you get an accident, you die. Yes. If you can think of agrochemicals, craziest incident. We've got a situation where there are now fake seeds. You know the stuff you plant in the ground? There are farmers who get fake seeds across East Africa. And this doesn't only impoverish the farmers. So people talk about suicide because farmers are unable to sell their crop. It's not always because the crop failure is due on weather. It's due to weather. Sometimes it's due to fake inputs, whether seeds or something else. So not only do these seeds, impoverish farmers, they also pollute the groundwater when the pesticides that are used are also fake. So any industry that conceivably could touch lives, we believe we have a solution to some of the supply chain problems that they are confronting.
So, but there are clearly very powerful and potentially very lucrative commercial applications to what you're saying as well. If you're serving an auto parts maker, stands to gain a great deal by establishing their authenticity. There's money to be made.
More than that, if you're an insurance company and somebody comes and buys a comprehensive insurance package from you, a time will come when you will want to know whether the car they've bought and every input you're putting in the car is genuine. You don't want to fake Aston Martin. So for that reason, I believe it's not just necessarily the industries in which we penetrate, but all the adjacent industries will be touched by this. Because we are entering into a world where we are automating trust. That is what we do. We are entering into a world where trust becomes not a commodity, but becomes a system of currencies that enable people to interact with confidence. And if that trust is supposed to be automated, and we are one of the few people working in that area, you bet that ideas are going to spread across the world in different formats and in different ways.
So then you have the potential, whether you choose to follow it or not, to go from being a social entrepreneur to being just an entrepreneur.
It's a good question. I've always said that most entrepreneurs in Africa are entrepreneurs. Sorry, are social entrepreneurs. The only reason I wouldn't say all of them is that we still do have a few tobacco companies left. But generally speaking, if you're creating jobs in Africa, if you are, paying taxes on the continent, if you are allowing young people, young minds to be trained in your facilities, etc., you're doing an immensely social task. Even our financial system is different from the way that it's now grown in the West. We don't have the same degree of financialization of the economy with these derivatives that you don't understand, etc. So I will say that, yes, indeed it's true that most entrepreneurs in Africa are social entrepreneurs. The difference between traditional social entrepreneurs, though, and this new novel use of the word social entrepreneur in the African context, is that with social entrepreneurs, they do intend to solve the problem. I always argue that if you're a commercial entrepreneur and, let's say you sell insurance, you really don't care that much if a particular atrocity or catastrophe for which you are insuring against, underwriting against, continue to happen. I mean, the insurer doesn't go to bed praying that accidents stop or that flaws don't happen. It doesn't, But an social entrepreneur, I do want the counterfeiting to stop, which is why I'm busy looking for new ways to add value. And I think that distinguishes social entrepreneurs in a fascinating kind of way, because they do genuinely want to solve the problem. It doesn't matter if solving the problem means they can't make money from that opportunity. And I think that's fundamentally different.
You sort of lead me down an interesting path, which is, are there products and services to which you would not attach your technology?
very interesting. So one of the fascinating, values conversation we had to have in our business was when we were approached by the WHO some years ago about tobacco.
Yes.
And the funny thing about tobacco is that there is an intersection of interest. The government wants to tax tobacco, with a lot of gusto, because there's a lot of money to be made from tobacco. So they want to protect against counterfeit tobacco. They want you to get a real stuff, so it kills you. But and obviously I also make money from trying to have my service all over the world in a way that can replicate it. So I said to the WHO, I like this new intersection, but what is the angle? Then they said, well, there's fake tobacco. It makes the problem difficult to track. So if we can track which tobacco is where, etc., it makes the job of trying to solve the problem much easier. But better than that, if somebody authenticated the tobacco, then they can also be enrolled in a cessation program.
Yes.
Which is brilliant. So it's not brilliant. But I took it to my team and they were not moved. They said the only way we will do this is they have to couple it with another pending regulation which hasn't passed, which is that all tobacco products should have zero packaging, which means they should be white. You should have the packaging with no advertising on it. And then we'll put our code on there, and when you text it, only then do you know what you bought. I said, that's brilliant. I mean, I love that idea. I thought that, that will work. But obviously, the WHO didn't have the power to get the likes of Austria, which changed its name from Philip Morris because, they didn't like what they were doing, And they thought changing the name made a difference. But so there are certain things that we will not touch yet, but it has to be carefully thought through.
Another scenario then for you, just a thought experiment. You were just in India. This is certainly true in India and many parts of Africa too. Spurious alcohol kills hundreds of people every year.
Yeah.
People buying what they think is a regular brand, but it is fake. Sometimes it's poisonous, badly made. People die or get very badly ill. Would you put your product on alcohol?
Well, so here I'm going to be a bit sophisticated because I'm going to argue that it depends on which type of alcohol. There are alcohols that are so culturally embedded, like wine in France, that it will be very difficult to describe it in the way that we often describe, alcohol in certain other contexts. And the reason why that is because in a typical French home, children start to drink wine from a very young age. And we've discovered fascinatingly that because of that, the problems with alcoholism that you see in places like the UK and Germany, you don't see in France. France has a very, very, I wouldn't say perfect, but much
but that's
reduced.
A consumption problem. That's not a fake versus real problem.
No, so the point is that alcohol is not always, so that's why there's going to be some sophistry here because I haven't really thought about the problem deeply. But there is definitely a situation with some alcohols being different from some other alcohols. Okay. And I know very well that when it comes to wines and traditional types of drinks like Perrier and stuff like that, maybe we will consider it. Purely from protecting not only the fact that a lot of people who drink it are not using it purely recreational, but it's deeply cultural. It's very part of their culture. I don't know whether I would do hard spirits. But there could be a context. There could be a context why protecting that particular product has more social benefits than not protecting it. I haven't considered it deeply.
Right, Simons? Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
Ladies and gentlemen.